Hello and welcome to the second episode of BlazQ. BlazQ is an interactive live coding series to help you get started with your software development career. Um, so it's our second episode. What we're doing today is like something I can show you directly. I just need to go to my virtual machine. So we will develop a small quiz where you can where you can enter your name. I'm good player. You can select an avatar, which are mostly cat pictures, different cat pictures, of course. And then we can answer some questions and just pick randomly stuff here. And we can try it again. It's the same questions. Again, very basic thing. Or we could play as another player, choosing I'm good and a different avatar. And then we can start. Okay, so this is what we want to do in this episode. And we switching back to the slides. Not many slides today. Okay, so what is in the episode today? First, we go through a kind of report from the last episode. We creating the Blazor application, our first Blazor application. We kind of inspecting the skeleton. So what is the Blazor application made of? And then we start going directly into the coding and building the quiz. Okay, but before, I just want to remind you of our learning values. Again, BlazQ is I try to create a safe learning environment, a space where we can learn and where we can grow. And therefore, we need values. First value is never ever hesitate to ask a question, even if you think it's a dumb one. Um, no one is free of error, which includes me. So if you feel free to point out to any error or any incorrection. Third, it's about learning. So we're doing stuff you wouldn't maybe do in production, or they are kind of suboptimal. But again, this series is about accelerating learning, not creating the best quiz game ever. And lastly, just a kind reminder that we treat each other with respect in discussions, in the chat, and yeah, every other interaction too. Okay, last episode. So where do we are? Last time I had one live viewer, and I still really appreciate um, this effort. It was great to knowing not to be alone. And again, thank you to my current live viewer. Again, it makes me feel a lot better. We had 24 views on Twitch, 9 on YouTube. I have not received a feedback form nor a discussion as it started. On GitHub, we have 3 stars and 2 followers. As I mentioned, no feedback form received, so the changes you have seen today are based on introspection. So what is new? We had a teaser for an episode. Next time I try to produce a little bit earlier, so maybe 5 days ahead of the next episode. You maybe have seen the 10 minutes quiz before we actually start the episode. I've triple checked my bandwidth connection this time, and it was running smoothly from the beginning. And I created a kind of a client to observe the chat better and to kind of yeah, can answer questions more responsibly. Okay, so the numbers maybe are not impressive, but I think they are impressive. What I believe it is this entire BlazQ thing, it's not about me, it's not a one-man show. I believe it's about creating a learning environment, a learning experience. And by doing so, we're creating community. And building community takes time. It might be very slow at the beginning and maybe sometimes not as motivating as it could be. But again, I will showing this report for each episode because if you start to reaching out to people, talk about what we're doing here, you will see there will be a direct impact. We will have, for example, more views, we will have more stars, we have ongoing discussions. So you can see you will have a direct impact on this growing community and you will help not only me, but also all others who watching also the recorded sessions to create a thriving community. So I keep faith and I stay motivated and still hoping for the best. Yeah, okay. So after this kind of reminder, we go direct into coding by thinking about how we can create an application. So I'm starting with um, creating a new folder somewhere on my disk, and I call it coding practice 2 because I already have a coding practice from yesterday. Amazing. I open a shell window here. It can be command shell, PowerShell, or any other shell possible in the system. And the good thing is we have a lot of possibility to kind of scaffolding a project. We can type .NET new minus minus list, and the result will be all templates we can use to scaffolding application. And what we are looking here is this Blazor WebAssembly application. So we type .NET new. We want to have a Blazor WebAssembly application, and the name minus n should be like BlazQ episode 2. The result will be something will be restored. We just making ls. We see a new file is created. I just direct jump into with change directory cd into the folder. We're doing again a list. And the good thing is we can now, if we are in the directory, typing .NET run, which will build our application and configuring a kind of web server. The server is listening via HTTPS on port 5001 and normal on 5000. So I just can open my old thing, reloading it. And what we can see here is the um, default template of a Blazor web application. So we have already a functional application without doing anything, which is great. Okay, so next step is I stop running the application by typing Control C. And now we can open Visual Code by just typing code. We open a folder, as I said yesterday, coding practice 2, BlazQ episode 2, and open. So now we try to understand why things are looking this way. So I switch these on the left side. I say I want to have these things, and I'm switching these on the right side. Okay, just by we go now briefly through the files and figuring out what they do, and starting by program. I close now the files so we can concentrate here. Each program is a sequence of commands executed by the CPU. But this kind of loop has to start somewhere. That's why each program has a starting point. In C, and a lot of languages inspired by C, this first method or function is called main. So if we're running our application, this is what will happen first, or to be honest, an entire cycle. So even if we maybe don't understand what's going on, what we see, it's like we have main, so here we are starting, something builds and runs. So as long as this function is not exit, our program will run. That's the program thing. Well, let's see what other files we have. We have a project file. This is used by the compiler and toolchain to determine what they should do. We have an app razor. This is maybe interesting. We see there's a kind of router. The router has two different properties or two different aspects, one found and one not found. And if found, we should use a root view. And if not found, we should use a layout view and putting, sorry, there's nothing at this address. Let's try. I just entering something. Oh, you're right. Application's not running. I need to use .NET Run again. Okay, so we see there's nothing at this address. Okay, what else do we have? We have imports. Okay, using. I mean, a lot of usings, maybe probably not something we need to pay attention now. And then we have like the www root, also very interesting, where we have an index HTML file. Have a look at it. So we can see there's something like a description. We have a head, we have a body, and the body is something which is called, we have an ID app, where we see loading, and I just want to reload it. So we see for 1 second loading here and loading here. Spoiler alert, this is something we will see as soon as we're producing an error, and we will produce a lot of error during this episode. And we have something like a script. So these things seems to be related to our layout because we're seeing loading. Okay, and remember we had here something like app, ID app. So we're going back to our program, and there we see I want to have a WebAssembly host builder, and I have a root component. And this root component is of type app. That's the thing we have seen here, app, because it's called app. And we, oops, and we have kind of corresponding app here. And just to make a proof, I change it to app 45. I going back to our index HTML. I change it to app 45. I save both files. I closing the application and running it again. It's running, and still looks the same. To make another proof, I just change it to app, save it, reload. And as I promised, we see there was an error. Okay, so this is part of the start of the application. I just change it back to app and also here to app. I change both files. I stop the running application and building it again and switching back to our view. Okay, so index is like the kind of first file which is loaded where we set our root component. Our root component is based on a routing view, which is quite interesting. And we see there's a layout view. We can find the layout view in the shared folder where we have, I just have reloaded, going back to home, where we have like main layout. So without paying a close detail to what all of this means, we see there is a kind of top row. At this top row we have about, and then we have something which is called body. Okay, and we have pages. So for example, we have an index page. So if nothing is specified, this should be the component which is used for displaying. If not specified elsewhere, the default layout will be used. So this layout will be used, which will become the body. And just to make a proof, remember what we have seen here. We have the counter component, which is here, /counter/counter. I have the fetch data component, which is fetch data, fetch data. And maybe we go back to the index component. And what I'm doing now, I'm showing the kind of results or the resulting HTML structure. So what you can see here, it's the so-called developer tools of a browser. Usually it's function key 12. And it looks different in different browsers, but mostly it's the same thing. Yeah. Okay. So Briefly, we have the in www root we have the index HTML. So index HTML has a head which has some hoops, which has some things in it. It's correlated here. We have a body. Inside the body we have an app, something which has the ID app. You can see here. And as I said, now we have the layout page. The layout page has div class page, div class page, whatever these div and class means. Um, we have a sidebar, which is interesting. It's sidebar. Then we have in the sidebar something which is um, here. And for example, if we would go into the nav menu, nav menu razor, we would see the same thing what we have seen here with here. Nav flex column. Yeah. So I going back to main layout razor. Main layout razor, we have app, page, sidebar, main. In the main, we have a top row, and in the top, we have a top row and we have a content. And in the content, I see hello world, which is exactly the same thing as our page has started hello world with a so-called heading of level 1. Yeah, so this is what a Blaze application is. We can just put a page into it, and as long as we're sticking to the default layout and only have one layout, it's just working out of the box based on conventions. Yeah, so we created our first Blaze application. We briefly discussed the skeleton. So now we can start building our application. So our quiz, our own application using these great technologies. I will first stop running it. There are two ways to um, there are two ways to get started. What I have done, I've used the default template and got rid of all the things we don't need for application. I put it into our GitHub repository. So we have here episode 2, where we can see like the starting version. It looks the same. The pages are missing because we are creating new pages. The some of the layout things are missing. Not missing. I deleted on purpose. So I would recommend to starting from here. Just a reminder, we can copy it here. I just will close this console window. I will close this console window. Console window closed. Console window closed. I open a new file. Again, new folder. It's important. You just can create it anywhere you want. I just use a new file name for saying, oops, laser second episode. I open PowerShell again and typing git clone, and I have copied the URL. Amazing. So copy, copy, waiting some seconds, going back to this folder where I have episode 2, BlazQ episode, and I can now open it with VS Code. Okay, I hope it was not a very long introduction. Of course, resolve the dependencies as you like. Doing everything, and yeah, what I'm doing now, because we're constantly changing stuff here, and we don't need the debugger as we used it or as we needed in the first episode. So there's a kind of very nice command which is .NET watch run. What this command does it will observe all of our files, and as soon as we change the files, it will recompile the application, meaning reloading the application. I will now make it full screen. I'm reloading it, and there's nothing at this address because we don't have any page. And this is a great starting point by creating our own page. We're starting our quiz by creating a player profile. So why not creating a folder and call them player? We're creating a new file, which I call player details page.razor. .razor is important because otherwise the compiler won't recognize our file and not doing its magic. And we really want that it will doing its magic. So I starting putting a page directive, and if nothing is there, please display this page. I'm adding something like page1 player details. I'm saving the file. You can see this time this command wasn't triggered because there's kind of it's not really a bug. It's a kind of wished behavior. But if you're changing things in a file which hasn't existed before you starting the command, it won't recognize it. Or the change detection won't recognize it, but it will be still working. Okay. Anyway, so it's working, and let's see. Because it's the index page, it's working. If you would put something else in it, like, well, let's say player, save it here. Waiting a second would be the same issue, but if I go into player, I can see the page, and it's amazing. At least I think it's amazing. Okay, so I will stop watch for now. Again, Control C, and think about it. If you remember the teaser or even the prelude at the beginning, we had a player, and the player had a name and an avatar. So in programming, especially if we're using so-called object-oriented programming, we try to solve our problems by um, separating it in different paths. And these paths are usually called classes. And I start by creating a class. I can right-click New C# class, which is provided by an awesome extension, which is called C# extension. So I just can click Player New Class, and I can type the name. I will choose Player View Model and explaining all of these. So if you start to learn coding, usually you have to face two problems which are kind of very neatly intertwined. You have to understand the concepts and you have to understand the syntax at the same time. And unfortunately, I haven't really found a way to tackle only one problem at a time. Um, so I try my best to make sense of the syntax and make sense of the syntax in the context of what we want to achieve when we program. Okay, so a class, you can think about a class as a blueprint. It is an instruction to create something, and this something has usually attributes or some data it owns and a behavior, so something it can do. Think about a car or any other job object will fit too. A car. A car has some properties, some attributes like color, type, manufacturer, produced at, produced by, owned by, and has also some abilities. A car, for example, can drive, it can turn, it can make a turn, it can stop, it can brake. And if you realize, again, so a lot of things, but sometimes we don't need this behavior. We only need attributes. We only need properties. In this case, it is sometimes very useful to create classes for a purpose of communicating, of messaging between different parts of our program. And that's why I call these class models, usually view model if they are used in a UI thing, just to make it sure from the name, from the point of the name, that this thing is not actually a class with a lot of cool behavior in it. It's just something which is used to as a message to transport data between different parts of the application. Okay, long story. I just write something and explain it later. Get set public string. Whoops, avatar URL get set. Sorry, better. And okay, so what we see here is called in C# a property. A property has a type string, which is a sequence of chars, so we can put any char sequence we have in mind in it. And what does public in this context mean? Public means whoever uses player view model can access reading name and can writing the name. The same is true for avatar. What public means in front of a class is this class can be used everywhere from every other programmer on the world using our library or our program can use this class. Again, public get mean I can publicly read it. Set mean I can write it. String is just a sequence of characters. Okay, so name avatar URL. What we're doing now, we're going back to our page. We create a new directive, which is called code. So in this thing, I can write any code I want. So I create a player view model, model, and I just assign a new value by saying new. This is a kind of new feature in the latest language specification. Before I would have to use these, which is again the same thing. What this means? Now I have something private. Private means only the player details page in this context can access these variable. By the way, it's called field. I'm just saying variable for now to reducing the kind of different words. So we have a player view model and we call it model. And I want to assign a value. So this player view model is now a new model. And new is if you think about if we said before, a class is a blueprint. New actually uses the blueprint to create a so-called instance, to create an existence, to put this blueprint into existence. Okay, perfect. And we want to, and the user should be, or user, maybe let's call them player. And the player, of course, want to add a name and want to choose an avatar. So we need to add something which is called edit form, because we want to edit something. And what we want to edit is called is a model, and this model should be our model. So by clicking Control, it will jump directly to the definition of the variable. So this form, again, forms a kind of shell for manipulating data. I want to edit my model. I want to do it by having an input text. I close this element because there's no more content, and I want to say, please bind the value of model.name. And just to make a kind of proof of concept, we're creating a text where we say, hi, model.name. I'm saving all of these files. I'm creating or executing the same command again, like .NET watch run. I ignore this window for now because I'm not interested in this HTTP version. I go back here. I reloading it. And probably I forgot to change it back, so I just change it now. You see, it's rebuilding. It's reloading. And here I can see my input field, and I just enter my name correctly. I need to these input element needs to lost focus, which means I have to click somewhere. Just typing, not change, but as soon as I leave, it will update. So now we have the ability that the user can change something. Player, sorry. It's like a software engineer, we usually call everyone user, which is, I think, yeah, very rare to call them users. Anyway, our players can now enter the name. The next thing, what we want to do is we want to think about the avatar. So a player view model has an URL, which makes it quite easy to display a picture later. Sorry, but it would not be nice to choose or to have to see the URL instead of a kind of descriptive name. So what we're doing now, we create a new class, and we call this class avatar view model. We're giving that a name, and we're giving it a URL. Same again. What this means, I can publicly write the name. Sorry, I can publicly write the name. I can publicly write the name, and I can publicly get the name. So all over the place, values are readable and writable. And to kind of shorten our feedback, shorten our development, I've created kind of some snippets because I don't want to type all these URL again. I've created something. Okay, so a little bit more of explanation is needed here. Now I don't have only an avatar view model. I have many of them, a list of avatar view models, and I name them possible avatars because the player will choose one out of this list. And so I create a new list, and in this list I add new avatar view models. I add new avatar view models by creating a new instance of the view models, by setting their name and the URL. And now I realize I forgot to mention one tiny thing inside, not tiny thing in these, yes, you can also have local pictures. So you can see we using here like publicly available URLs, but you can also add later your own avatars by just dropping pictures here and using a path starting with a backslash. Okay, so now we have these four avatars, and now we need to create the possibility for a user to make a selection, and therefore we have a input select. For this input select, I say bind value, and please bind my model dot avatar URL. And here we have options. So I create one option. I could create another option and another option. But what makes more sense is to create an option for each avatar inside our list called possible avatars. And this is usually a clear indication that we need a loop because we want to do something not a fixed amount. We want to do something more often in kind of repetitive way. And C# offers us a very special loop, which is called for each, which is better explained when seeing it. So for each avatar view model avatar in possible avatars, I want to have an option where I have a value of avatar.name, a description of avatar or a label of avatar.name, and I want to have a value of avatar.url. So I get rid of the other options. I save all of our files, jumping back to the terminal. And now I can choose So just make point to look into the HTML. We see a select was created somewhere. I see the options with this value and the name. And if I add more things, better cat, I'm not changing the URL as a kind of proof. Building, reloading, better cat, better cat. Okay, so however, I think it would be good to just displaying it. So we can use an image, we can use source, and we said now source should be model. It's a good thing. I save it. It's recompiling. I choose. Now we can see it's working. So now happens something which is not um, sometimes what happens in this output field, I need to provoke it. Anyway, sometimes if you don't get, oh, it's working again. If you see something like this, it's helpful to restart VS Code to get the kind of, so it's so-called Razor language service with providing these suggestions for us. It's easy to restart it. Okay, so going back, if the player can already enter a name and choosing an avatar. But to be honest, it doesn't look very decent. I mean, it's working and it's great that it's working. It's something we can be really proud of, but it's not as cool as it could be. But for but I would say this problem is kind of solved. There are great frameworks out there. One is called Bootstrap. Um, so we're going into the docs. I'm choosing 4 because the template using 4 and 5 is still very fresh. Anyway, so I have here components. I zoom in a bit. We have components where we can see form. And we have kind of this nice looking thing. All we need to do is copy it here. Going back to our editor. Okay, so we have here a label. We have here an input, starting with the input. So I'm using my input text, copy it here. Type is not interesting because we have a class, we have an ID. These thing is used, everything which is out of the area is used by screen reader, which are very important for people who have kind of, for example, impaired vision. But for now, we don't really think about it or talk about it. The area thing. So again, we have added the class, we have the ID. If you see ID is used here too for the label. So we just giving another ID, kind of shorten it to name, and we entered here your player name. We get rid of the small thing. And yeah, we just save it. It's updating. And going back to, now we have a nice looking input box, which is great. Which brings us to the next topic, the select thing. And fortunate, I can just look for select. And here we have an example of a select. So it's pretty much the same thing here. I replace the options and the select with our select. The select has a class and an ID, so I just copy it, putting it here. I get rid of the select and I say avatar, and something like choose your avatar. And I forgot to close it. Input select need to be close before div closes. Yeah, now I've got an error because I closed it here. It shouldn't have been closed before here. And correcting. Yay! Okay, so there's a lot of more to understand about this layout process, about what a div is, why we can put a class in it, and why all of this is working. And we will explain it in the next episode, where we're really going forward to understanding what HTML, what this so-called CSS is, and what Bootstrap does for us. For this episode, we have a lot to chew and a lot to digest if we think about all these kind also from program perspective. So we can just be very, very lucky that some problems have already been solved for us. And for now, we just copy it and use it. Okay, so there's another thing I want to introduce because I really like the concept of cards in Bootstrap. This is a card. There are cards having a nice thing of a header. Here, for example, we have a header, card style. So I create a card. I'm card header, like create your profile. I don't want to have this list group, but what I want to have is my edit form. So unfortunately, it's not formatting as I want it to be. So with we can type if you want that everything here is nice indented, so having the kind of right space between. Sometimes, as I said, the language server is not working. So if you try to format, which can be done by, I don't only know the shortcut to be honest, which is Alt Shift and F, which formats the source code. If it's not working, we need to restart VS Code, which is again quite easily done. I just restarted, going back to what I've done so far. Open the code here. Waiting a little bit if we're ready, and now it's working perfectly. Okay, so just because with all these, it's easier to spot where we need to pay attention. I going back to terminal, I running .NET watch run. Taking a little bit of time to build. I'm ignoring this window because I've created my incognito window here. So now we have these in this kind of card. It's kind of huge, and I still need to think about what I'm doing with the other stuff here. Okay, so yeah, Bootstrap comes with a so-called layout grid system. I just type it and explain it while typing. So we have something which is called a container. A container can contain of multiple rows, and a row contains of column. And in Bootstrap, a column, one row consists of 12 columns. So if I would say class column 6, meaning only the half of the space of the page is occupied by whatever is um, inside these elements. So I remove it, not as I expected to work. So I remove it, I put it here, I put it outside, saving. actually a lot better. So what we're doing now is we create a second card for card. We create a second card and a second column. So row was this div. For some reason it's not working. Interesting. Um, so we have our edit form div. Wait a second. Kind of confused myself. So I have a card header. Inside the card header, I have an edit form on the same level as the card header. There's also div class card body, and inside this card body, I have a form. Makes sense. In this form, so one more form group label option can be here. Input select can be here. This is my form group div. Edit context div. My card body. Yep. So now if I makes sense. Now I want to have a different class column 6, and I want to have a card too. So I just again today is a lot of copy and pasting, but it's I think it's how we all started. Um, Now we call it your profile, and I don't need an edit form, but what I do need is the name, and for cards, for images in cards, there's this class. So I going under the card header, entering an image, setting source to what happened here. I get rid of it, try to format it again. Nope, not helpful. I have an error, usually because I also say it's not unclosed div tag. Oh, not cool. So card closes the column, closes the row. So I think no, I just had one. Okay, so for some reason the kind of formatter is confused. Anyway, interesting problem. So okay, I mean it's still not that we can say it's a beautiful look, but it's much more better. It's much better than what we have before. So well, um, give it maybe a better thing like welcome to, I should write correctly, to BlazQ, and then we can put a small in it, new quiz in town. Okay. Right. What I think, what I kind of dislike is if the player hasn't chosen anything, we see this kind of broken image symbol, which is basically because there is no source set. But it's nothing we can't fix easily. All we have to do is like we need to have an if model avatar URL equals equals what? There's a good thing about strings. There exists something to help you. In the string class itself, there's a method which is called null or empty. So if this URL is null or empty, only if it's not, sorry, only if it's not null or empty, I want to display the image. I'm saving it, waiting for a refresh. So I can see there's no image here, but as soon as I choose, I have an image. Pretty easy fix, I think. Okay, so we have we have a profile, we can enter name. What's totally missing is we can't start a game. Well, let's work on these tasks too. With this form, we have something which is called on submit. And on submit, I want to start a game. I copy it, running into our coding thing, and what I'm writing now is something like private void start a game, brackets and curly brackets. What we have here is a so-called method. So the method is now actually a behavior. We can do something, we can execute something in here. Void means whatever this method is doing, there will be nothing to return, which is void. We can also have a string, for example, which means whatever this method is doing, it should return a string. Now the compiler complains that not all code paths return a value, not a string. I can also have, for example, a boolean or a double or an int, doesn't matter. We want to return a game, and we want to start a game. And it would be great to redirect the user, sorry, redirect the player um, to to the game side. So we're just creating a new folder, call it game. In this folder, we create a new file, call it game page.razor. I'm sorry, I will call it game session because it's only one session of the page. And I will game session. I will add a page and say, well, just game. And I create a headline like game is started, has started, has started, has started. Okay. To navigate, there's something which is called the navigation manager. And because I want to use navigation manager inside this page, I need to inject it. So I want to inject the navigation manager and I want to call this variable nav manager. And the nav manager has a good thing which is called nav manager navigate. And I want to navigate to game. So saving all files, compiling, reloading. And I now realize I totally forgot to enter a button. So something we can actually click to make this form submit. Um, so this time we go directly to Bootstrap because we have here a button category and you can see there are a lot of nice buttons. And I'm starting with these primary. So inside our edit form, I, oops, I, as I said, formatting today is kind of very weird. I want to add a button. This should be called like start game. And this button shouldn't be a button, it should be a submit. So a submit button triggers a submission of a form. A normal button just doing stuff. Um, so to kind of trigger these behavior, we need to have a submit or a button of type submit. Yeah, saving. We go back to our site. Now we have a very nice button right from the beginning. And I'm clicking start game. And you can see I'm redirected back to our game page. Yay! So our nav manager is working perfectly. We have a new page and it's working. So, but you may have seen I can just start a game even if I don't have valid data here. This should be something we should be considered because validation is one of these things you maybe don't pay enough attention, and I can kind of guarantee you, and I think everyone who started software development can guarantee you, um, your first users will always find ways to send invalid data in ways you have never imagined. So I think it's good to get started with it, and it's quite easy. We're going back to our view model, our player view model. I want that users, sorry, players are forced to enter a name. And we can do it by kind of decorating these variable and this property by in these brackets. I don't know the name of these brackets, to be honest. I've forgotten it. Um, wait, we have these are curly brackets, round brackets, and hmm, I really forgot the name. Anyway, um, so that will required, and I need to set a using here so that the compiler knows where I can whoops, so where I can use the required thing. And also the avatar should be required. There are plenty of other things for validation. I just showing something. For example, there's a string length attribute where I can say I want to have like should be less than um, should be less than 10 characters. Or I think I could also like a URL exists, URL attribute. Yeah, or it should be in URL, right? So we can add a lot of these things out of the box to our validation thing. Okay, next thing is our edit form need to be aware that our model, which is the player view model, uses these types of thing to um, to set the validation. So we're going into the player details page, onto our edit form. We set data annotations validator, and we're changing from on submit to on valid submit, because otherwise we don't want to start a game. I'm saving all the changes, which is by saving all changes simultaneously. It restarts. Um, as a proof, I haven't entered anything. You see, I've got an error. I can't start the game anymore. I have to enter a name. Here it's working, but I can't start. I have to enter a URL, and I can start. So maybe if you want to have also, so for example, we set max length 10. Now it's not working. But the user maybe, I mean, if it's empty, I just want to reload it. If it's empty, I think I've said user again, a player can guess what is wrong. But if we have something like a long name, it's maybe not clear why it is not accepted. Um, it's still a question I sometimes ask while using Twitter, why I'm kind of constrained with so. Anyway, there's so less charts. Okay, but also this is fixable. I can have like validation message, and I said validation message has a property which is called for, which looks a little bit different to at the beginning. What happened here? Wait, wait. Um, going back, starting over. I want to have the property for, which need to be in quotas, and I want to have something like model dot name. I put brackets around and that. They are kind of experimental, or maybe not, say not stable extensions for VS Code for making all of these highlighting more intuitive. So we can see when we're using actually just things like form control, and when we're using actually variables, something which is defined in our code. Okay. Validation message form makes sense. It's running. Now see the name field is required. I can enter some more. Must be a minimum of 10. Now we have also a kind of nice displayed um, validation, also a kind of nice displayed validation message. Okay, so what do we have achieved so far? And I think it's very important to remember that we have gone a very long way. We started the Blazor application by a by using a template. We got rid of all of these things we don't need. We created a view model for holding our data of a player. We used input forms to change this data. We had a form to make all of this happen. We used Bootstrap styling that it looks at least have a kind of decent look from the beginning. And now we have also implemented validation. So there's a lot of things happening in these first coding episode. But I think it's very important to see that um, these are not tiny steps because it's a lot to learn and understand. But everything and but it's possible and there are solutions. And sometimes they are again not obvious or evidential, but um, once you have understood the underlying system, it is easy to know where you have to look and what question you have to ask. Okay, so next problem. I am a player. I'm I'm player, and I'm choosing an avatar. That's an interesting thing. Interesting. Um, Maybe I should change it to more than 10. So if I start a game, I go into a different page. I go into the game session page. Here I'm the player details page, and here is the player details page. I have my model. I don't have the model here. So I need to find a way where I can transmit data between two different pages or in general components, which is a kind of, it may sound like a trivial task and it's not very complicated, but it's something you need to understand from the perspective of Blazor. Each page, each component um, is separated. Even if I have here a player, this entire page is destroyed and everything what we have remember is destroyed, garbage collected from the memory as soon as we switch the page. So we need to save this player and save it somewhere where we can access it from another page. And we're doing it by creating a new file, a new class, which we call game session state. And this class just have a start with player view model. I want to have the using. Again, compiler doesn't know what a player view model is. With this using player view with this using, compiler knows to find a player view model. I need to go here. Okay. And you may have remembered that we have used already the nav manager in our player details page. So what I'm doing now, I just inject another thing which I call game session state, and I call the variable state. And if we before navigating, we say state should be our player view model. Um, Model, sorry, should be our model. And to use these kind of injection, we need to announce it. And we announce it in the program, announce it to the builder, where we call builder services add, I explain it later, singleton. So the navigation manager, for instance, is also a service. Is something we can use in our components by inject. This is what service means. And I have different types of lifetimes of this service. There are kind of transient, singleton, and scoped. Transient and singleton means during the entire lifetime of the whole application, only one single instance will be there. And this is exactly what we need because the game session state is something which saves data between different pages, which you can use for communicating it. So I have a new game state session. I have the same here. I going now to game, game clearly this. I say inject game session state. I call it state. And just to make a proof, I want to say hi state dot player dot name. Really. And I set it to 30. And I going to save all files. It rebuilds. I have an error. Type this playable BlazQ game session state. Which makes sense. It's not state. Perfect. It's a state player. Because I want to set the player of the state. I can save it. It is building. I'm going back to game. I enter my name. I choose an avatar. I want to start a game. And we see the game has started. And I see my name. It is preserved between these two things. If I create a new player, choosing a different avatar, I have a new player. Perfect. So now we have set up the kind of basic for the game. What we need to do now is to really think about our game mechanics. Yeah, it's about thinking about our game mechanics. Okay, so and think about game mechanics in the sense of software development usually means I need a class. So I create a class and call this class game session. The game session will be our first really real class because we will add behavior. And think about a class. Think about a game or a game session. We need to have questions, which we need to have questions. So let's start with a new class and call it question view model. And question view model has property text. It has property. It has multiple options. And some of this option has to be true. So I would say like give me 1 second because I've prepared something and I just here. Oops. Oops. So again, nothing else what I've saying so far, just to having kind of constant naming. So adding two usings. Okay, so a question has a text which is displayed. We can choose between multiple options and we have like a correct option index. So which of these options is actually the right answer for the question? And we can now, again, I've prepared something because it's kind of tedious to write it down. I go into the game session and I said our game session um, should have multiple questions. In this case, 4 questions. Um, 4 questions with some answers, some correct options, and so on. The next thing we will do is we think about if we're having a game session, is something like a pre-requirement, something which is needed to exist before we can create a game session. And indeed, we can't have a game session without um, a player. Oops. Um, so again, syntax and understanding. What we have here, it looks similar to what we have done in the as a method before. Remember, like starting game, like private void name of the method. What we have here is a so-called constructor. It looks like a method, but it doesn't have a return type. Or you can say it has a return type, but no name. And the name of the return type has to be the same as the class. So what does this mean? If someone, or if we, when we're coding, want to create an instance of a game session, we need to provide a player. So, and this player should be later be accessible. So I said public player view model player, but now it should be public readable, which is okay, but it should only be set once while initiating. So now I can say player is player. Also a very nice new feature of C Sharp 9 to having this init thing. Okay, so syntax. Here we have the constructor. The constructor is something which creates, which is called when you create an instance, when you want to create an instance of an object. What this means from a concept point of view, I can't have a game session without a player. And to enforce this rule, I create a constructor. I save the player and make it public readable, but only I, meaning the constructor, the class itself, can set it during construction. Okay. Now with player, we have, but we also need to do, need to think about the kind of flow through the quiz. We will have one question at a time. So we need to keep track of which question is currently, let's say, active. And we can keep track of if we're saving it. So like private, we're using an int as an integer number. So yeah, a number without any fractions. And I call it question index. And why not, sorry, why not making it public get, but only private set? So everyone can read the current question index, but no one except us, except the game session, can set it. Then we create another method just to help us to make things a little bit easier. Question view model get current question with nothing as input, and I return questions at the space of question index. Again, a list has multiple elements in it, and we can access one element by using these type of breaks and pointing any number in it, like 1, 10, or 3. But because this number will change over time as soon as we progress through our quiz, we need to put a variable in it, like question index. And it's a good way to set question index to 0. Because remember in C Sharp, in all lists, in all arrays, we always start with 0. So the first element has the index 0. Yeah, which makes sense if you going back to C and how memory is organized and what arrays actually are. And anyway, just remember the first element in a list or an array has always the index 0. Okay, equipped with this session, we need to change some minor things. I go into player details, and now what I'm doing, I'm creating a game session. I using help of using game, new game session, and with my model. So that is a constructor we have seen before. To creating a new instance of a game session, I need to provide a player view model. What was session before? Again, I just using control to navigate to it. Should be now a game session, not player, but session. Oops, not should be a session. And this session should be used in the it's still the state. Um, session player.name. It's getting kind of very long to always typing these things. So we create something and we create something to um, yeah. So we will create something, but first let me check if we have any errors. And there is an error. Yeah, makes sense. I want to assign session, not model anymore. Saving, starting. Okay, so back to our page here. What we see now is also very interesting. We go to game, and as I promised, this was the error dialog we have seen before. So let's check out what an error we have. It says like unhandled exception rendering component object reference not set to an instance of an object is the so-called and it's very famous null reference exception. Um, my guess is it is the exception developers around the globe facing most often null reference exception. Let me explain what happened here. So in our game session page, we try to use state session. Okay, state is injected by the system, and because it's a singleton, it will never be null. Not a problem. But session could be null, and if session is null, I can't access player, and if player is null, I can't access name. So what I need to do is to building something like, let's say, if state.session is not null, only then I want to display the name. So let's see if it fixes it. Well, it's not an error anymore, but it's also not very useful. What would be more useful is if we would redirect the user back to the page. So we back to the page where they can create their profile. So we get back to the navigation manager, nav manager, um, and override. Interesting. Okay, protected override initialized. Um, our game session page is a component. Each component has a life cycle, and the life cycle has different methods. And one of these methods is initialize, which is called once, as soon as the component came into existence. And this is the ideal point where we can write the same thing. If state dot session equals null, I want that our navigation manager navigate to our page. And then I want to immediately return. So nothing else is to do from this point of view. Protected override, and I missed void initialization, I think. So it was so fast. I'm just going to game, and you see it's redirect us immediately back to our page. another nice thing protected. Okay, so why not using the same card layout? We will display the player card on the left side, and we will display the on the right side, and we will display the questions on the left side. So we just again copy and paste things, and then we change some of them. So we go in here, we going directly here. We getting rid of the edit form, but not of the card body, not of anything else. It's working. Um, so here in our player details, we had like model was our player view model. And I would like to make it a kind of shortened. So I created something like private game session and call it session with double S. And else session should be state.session. And I want if not is empty. It can't be empty at this point anymore because we enforce it by using the player view model, so we can get rid of the if. And now we can have session dot player dot avatar URL, and we can have the same here. Instead of avatar URL, we can choose name. Okay, so finished, finished, finished. We have the game card. Now we think about here, and I say question number session question index, and should be like session. Now you see why I've created the get current question comes now in handy. I won't have display the text. Okay, what we should see now is a kind of more um, more decent looking version of our game, and we should see a question. And because I want to have options, I want to display them too. So let's say for each wow, string item in session, sorry, item string in session dot get current question dot options, and I call it option. And I just want to print them, so we're putting a little element around. So let's see what our result is. So I still need to create a session. So multiple things. I mean, we have a good look, perfect. I mean, copy and paste for the win. Question 0, which is totally fine because index 0, but it's not really friendly for displaying. It looks good, and we have to think something about the options here. Okay, so first things first, I put it into brackets, and I just put a plus 1. So instead of 0, we would have 1. Instead of 1, we would have 2. And for these now, there's something which is called input radio group. So a group of radio buttons. Radio buttons are these circle ones where you can only choose one. And for each option, I want to have an input button. I want to have, oh, it's again. For each of these input button, I want to have like an input radio. This input radio should have something like options and value um, okay. So we have a value button, we have a radio button, we have radio group, but now we have a kind of, the error message here is not really described if you don't know what you are looking for. If you remember, before our player details page, we created something which was called edit form, and we created a model. So what we need to do now, we still need to create a new model, and this model is like an answer view model with only one property, the chosen index. So I'm going back, I copy my answer view model, I go back to my game session page. I create a new variable with my answer view model and set current answer, and I create a new model, new answer view model. I using this model for a context, for an edit form, setting these as model property. I use embed the input group inside the edit form, and I say now bind value should be current answer dot chosen index, and now it's vanishing, which is great for each. So value, and I'm before talking about this problem, I just want to inspect what I want to have small value 1. Okay. Um, sorry. Distraction, kids. Okay. So we have an input radio group, which we bind our chosen index, and we have now something which is again, sometimes errors are not as descriptive as they could be, but it's all about learning. So we need to specify a type, it said here, um, which again is great. Um, so sorry, a little bit distracted. So we want to bind the index, but we don't have an index yet. So what we need to do, we need to define kind of do it here directly. Let's say I want to have an int, I call it option index, and it should be 0. And the value of this radio button should be option index. So now everyone would have the same option and would have the same value. So we say option index should be incremented by 1, which is usually a plus plus. So option index would be 0, and the next option index would be 1. Next cycle, I end at 1, and so on. So here we can now use option to display things. Okay, saving, and we will see what it looks like. I still have an error. I still have an error. Hmm. Edit context. Ah, edit context is wrong. Interesting. Um, chosen index. Ah, okay. Answer view model doesn't contain an index form. Answer view model, answer view model. I haven't saved it. Makes perfect sense. Ugh. So it was everything right. I copied it, but I haven't saved the file. So it wasn't able to find this property. Now everything is running smoothly again. So I enter a name, I choose a cat, and now I have radio buttons. The only thing is kind of I can see the value, but what I can't see is like I can't see the option. Okay, not what we wanted because the user should not only see 1, 2, 3 um, without selecting. There's not so much sense in it. Okay, however, there's kind of easy solution, and the solution is again Bootstrap. So we going back to forms where we find checkboxes and radios. Default checkbox, default radio. So this thing needs to be done for each checkbox, for each radio button. So here we have our input radio. I make it self-contained. We have input class, type radio is not needed. So we can add class. We can have the ID and value thing. We don't need value, we only need ID. And as ID, this should be unique, we can just use our option index. So then we have our label. Our label has 4, which is again the option index. And here we can print our option. Option. Okay. Saving. Going back to our form, entering a name. Now I can choose different options. It looks like I want the question to be low. Yeah. Now we have done a lot of things, which again is great. Um, but how can I make it possible to see another question? We already have done something like this, so we need to have a kind of on valid submit. Um, well, let's say next question. We want to have a kind of more expressive, so like show next question. And private void show next question. Yeah, this is something our session really should do, like move to next question. Because what we would like to do, we would like to change the index, but we can't because the index is only can only be set through the session, and maybe we don't know if the session is already ended or not. So it's a good thing to think about the session as an independent worker, and we don't know how the session is functional, but we know it has the capability to move to the next question, and so we implement this method here. Say practically private void move to next question. And what we are doing is like question index is old question index incremented by 1. Old question index incremented by 1. So let's see. The name. I forgot again the button, which is great. I forgot the submit button. On the edit form, so I add a button of type submit with the class btn default, and something like submit answer, or just answer, saving, wait. Move to next question is inaccessible. Oh, it's private. I won't have it public. not shortcuts. Okay, so player name, choose something. Oops, it's the URL attribute. Um, yeah, so you see, it's working until we are here. So first thing, I'm not sure why the button looks not as I expected. So first fix is poorly visual. BTN, BTN default. BTN primary makes sense. Okay, easy fix later. So I'm just starting the game again. Just starting the game again. So um, I can select something. I can go to the next question. We see the selection is remembered through the question, which is not as we wanted it to be. We still have the problem that we don't see the solution. Would be great to at least seeing if we are right and if we have answered right or wrong. And if we are to the left, and if we see in the last question, it's like we're getting an error. And what does this error set? The error set also a very common argument out of range exception, which is great because we always we increment the index by one without keeping in mind that our questions have boundaries. So we're making some changes here. We're starting with our game session. So doing um, instead of just blindly increasing it, we say only if question index is smaller than questions count minus one. Why minus one? So think about it. We have here 4 questions in our list. So count is 4. But the indices are 0, 1, 2, and 3. So I need to prevent that ever index 4 will be set. So count is 4, so 4 minus 1 is 3. 3 is not smaller than 3, so it wouldn't increment index further. So this should solve 2 of our problems. First, the button should look a little bit better. Okay, okay. At least no error. But it's not really a good fix. And also it's not a good fix that we can't see the answers. So this has something to do with our game session. So we doing a kind of trick here. Instead of show next question, we rename the function to reveal answer. Um, yeah, reveal answer. And instead of moving to the next question, we just setting a kind of flag, boolean show answers. Answers. And I said show answers should be true. So, and I want to add a different background color. Reveal answers. And I want to have a background color to see if the answer is right or wrong. So I create a new method. I call it private void add option, not add set option background. And because I have to do it for every row, let's say I need an input like option index. And I don't want to return a void, I want to return a string. Okay, so if show answers is false, which is, by the way, the default value. Um, I don't want to return anything, so I return string dot empty. Otherwise, if option is session get current question, like current option index, I want to return, I forgot the name, but it's no problem. It's like www css app css. It is option, correct option here. I want to return correct option. Otherwise, I want to return string dot empty. So, and now we need to call it div class form check, and I add set option background with option index. We save. It's rebuilding. So what we're expecting now, I can't move to another question, but at least I should see the right answer. So I'm selecting something, and the right answer becomes gets this kind of nice optical visible background. Okay, so background done, done. Now we have to reveal the question. There was also, if you remember, one other issue. It was like the answer was remembered throughout the different question. So what we're doing now, we're not only revealing the answer, but we're implementing the method we have before, like move to next question. And we're doing it. Move to next question. We already know we can set session move to next question. Sorry, session move to next question as possible. And when I move to next question, I set current answer slash new answer view model, and show answer should be false. So let's see. I forgot another thing, but not this time. Um, I need a different type of button. So I implement a new button. I call it, it should be of type button, class, btn, primary, and next question. I say if show answers false, I want to have this button, and if not, I want to have this button. Okay. This button, because it was a submit button, was linked to our edit form. For this button, we need to create a new way of interaction, which is also not problematic. We can have just on click, and I want to move to next question. It's the same thing here, just pointing to the name of the method, and you can see where it's implemented. So now I save it, waiting for rebuilding, going back, going going back to the page, choosing an image, answering question, seeing the result, can go to the next question. I think I've misspelled it on the class name. Let's have a look. Um, yep, misspelled the class name. I can go to the next question. I can go here to the next question. I can see here something. So last thing, which is kind of really, needed, is this. I can't. I mean, it's triggering here now, but there's no question anymore. So what we would need to do is like redirect the user to a result page. And I promise this is um, after all we have done so far, it's quite easy. Let's start in here with move to next question. So it would be great to see not to only move to the next question, but see if we can move to the next question. In this case, we would return true, otherwise false. And the game session, oops, and the game session would use something like Boolean. Is there another question? So if is there another question is true equals true, then we're doing everything we have done before. But if not, we're using our navigation manager, which was nav manager, navigate to, let's say we want to navigate to results. Okay. We're creating a new folder called results, where we add a new file, which we called, the razor is right, but let's say result page. And what we're doing now, it's very evil. We just copy the entire game session page because we need a lot of it. We need change it to results. We need nav manager. We can change the heading here. Oh, finished. We can use the container. We will change something here, like your results. We can get rid of the edit form. We can still use profile thing. We don't need the game session. We don't need an answer model. We need on initialize because we still have the same. Sorry, session is okay. Because we still have the same logic here to redirect. I don't need that, and we don't need it too. Also not. Also not. So, well, let's see what we have done so far. We should now be able to play our game. I can answer questions, and when I have answered them, I will see my results. So we're on the result page. It was working perfectly. Okay, so one tiny thing. I've already created, copy it here to make our result page looks more like cut body was and diff to just add two buttons, which are try it again and play as another player. And I want to add Lazily, our moderator here. So we have these columns here, and yeah, try it again. Okay, so we're going back to this page. So now it's about giving the user the opportunity to restart as the same user, or to try the game as a new user. And let's start with try it again. We do the same thing as we have done before, like on click. And with on click, we just why not try it or restart session. I'm going back here. We're creating a new method, private void restart session, and I want this session to be restarted. I don't know how. I mean, I as a result page don't know how the restart should work, but I know there should be the possibility to restart. And as soon as soon I have restarted it, I can navigate back to game. And what does restart mean? Our session currently don't save any really progress, like how many right answers or or how many wrong answers, points or rows or anything we have so far. So we can go back to our game session. Ooh, restart. We can go back to our game session, which is here. We create a new public method. We don't doesn't return something. We call it restart. And what we are doing is technically setting the just the question index, not to 1, to 0. Okay. And if we want to restart the entire game, all we will have to do is like on click, all we have to do is like restart game. And the game, I should spell correctly. And this is also not very complicated because all we have to do is like we have to go in our session state, 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 just state. State dot session should be null because we don't want to render it. And then all we have to do is navigate back to our main page. So saving everything, waiting until it's rebuilt, and yeah. So player name is my final game, and of course I need to add a number, otherwise it wouldn't be. I got really attached to this type of cat. I choose 8. Oh, I think it was default. Um, also, Scott Pilgrim is a very nice movie. I can really recommend. Um, it was free, and F is for Family also a very, very good Netflix series. Anyway, answer. Next question. Game has finished. I can try again. You can see the profile card still the same. Now I've very good remembered all the answers, so I will now score perfectly. Ah, not everyone. Or I can play as another player, which means hi, I'm unknown. I can enter a new name, and I can play with Kit as my avatar. So anyway, yeah, we are done. We have finished our quiz, and it was amazing. I mean, I had a lot of fun. It was also in preparation because I think especially this type of technology like as Blazor, C Sharp, and VS Code, it is it is fun because we can relatively easy build decent looking and with a relatively complexity application, and we don't need any special tools. And yeah, again, it's amazing. It is just amazing. Um, so let's wrap up. Let us wrap up um, our application. So I'm moving here because the slides a little bit easier. Okay, debrief. I think it's very important that we realize we have built our first version of this quiz, and it was amazing. We have done so much. I want to highlight how you can individualize, how you can change to kind of make it more your quiz, um, more quiz. Two things you can change something would be like in the player details page, you can create any avatar you like, and in the quest in the game session, you can create any question you have with any kind of complexity, and yeah, so everything what you want to do, you can do it here, and yeah. So back to the slides. Um, And also, along the way, we created our first class and we implemented their logic. We were able to reset. And even if the question index may seem like only one thing, it was important because only the class itself, only the game session has had control over this variable. And all others, like our game session or later our result page, used it use this class to, or use method like restart or move to next question to toggle this logic. But again, the actual manipulation, and we could also think about counting and a lot of other stuff. I mean, counting the right answers could happen in this class. And yeah, it's a huge thing. Also, we have seen many moving parts of the Blazor application. So like layout, like app, and all of how these yeah kind of string together. We also, and I think it's very important, used our first form to get input from a user player, and we executed actions when buttons was clicked. Um, we implemented multiple pages. That's also, I think, an important to mention, and of also navigation between them. Yeah. So just a kind of reminder what's up next. Very briefly, next episode it's about we go into prettifying Blazor and working a little bit more on the game session, having um, more objects there. Next is couch co-op, so you can play with friends and family on your local device. And then we go into Uprising of the Jokers. We add more elements to game, so we kind of will enhance our game session to have more abilities. Then we go live, so we'll go briefly how we deploy things, um, and then we go directly into multiplayer things. So next episode, as I mentioned, prettifying BlazQ, we will have a deeper understanding of HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap, and we will also explore the component lifecycle. The next episode will air at the same time, so from now in a week on the 4th February, 8 p.m. PST. And yeah, so if you enjoyed it, or if you not enjoyed it, maybe it's even more important, um, please give me feedback. I want to make this a very valuable learning experience, and I can't do it without feedback. I've created a small form. It will take less than 5 minutes to fill it out. And yeah, as you have seen at the beginning, I will incorporate this feedback. I will show it transparently. So be assured your feedback is highly welcomed and will have real impact. Thanks for listening. I appreciate very much your time. And if you enjoyed it, feel free to come again and tell more about it. And if not, as I mentioned, there's a feedback form. You can add your concerns. Anyway, it was a great pleasure for me. I hope you enjoyed it too. I hope you have learned a lot. I hope you are energized. What else you can do with these amazing technologies? And yeah, I wish you a nice Thursday, or at my time, a nice Friday, a nice weekend. And yeah, see you soon. Bye.